My name is Margaret Ellis. I am 64 years old, and until that September morning in 2025, I thought my life would end quietly, perhaps in my sleep years from now. But fate had written it differently. The morning began like any other in my small Ohio town. The air was crisp, carrying the faint promise of rain, and the sky stretched in pale gray, heavy with clouds. I shuffled to my kitchen, where the old clock ticked steadily, marking the rhythm of a life I had long considered ordinary. My hands, worn from decades of nursing, reached for the coffee grounds. I inhaled the familiar, comforting aroma, feeling a flicker of warmth in my chest. Even in these simple moments, I was reminded of the lives I had touched, the pain I had carried for others. On the windowsill, the last tomatoes of summer glistened in the morning light. A bird brushed its wings against the glass feeder, delicate and alive. I should have felt peace, but I didn't. There was a weight pressing on my chest, silent and insistent, whispering that something was about to change. I poured the coffee grounds into the filter and listened to the gentle hiss as water dripped through. The familiar rhythm of my kitchen, the brewing coffee, the birds' fluttering wings, the soft ticking of the clock, was comforting, but it was not enough to quiet the unease that had settled over me. The night before had been restless. I had stayed up too late, glued to the news. The assassination of young political figure Charlie Kirk had shaken the nation. It wasn't the politics that tore at my heart, but the hate, the sheer, unrelenting anger I saw on every screen. I had cried in my old recliner, clutching the worn arms until my knuckles whitened. I cried for his family, for the person who did it, and for the world we were all trying to navigate. Dawn arrived, gray and soft, and I forced myself to carry on. I thought of my daughter Jessica, just 10 minutes away, and her children, Leo and Grace, the lights of my life. Their laughter, their little hands tugging at cucumbers in the garden, their voices filling rooms with joy. I clung to these memories like lifelines. I reached for my favorite mug, painted by Leo in streaks of blue and green. It made me smile even through the heaviness pressing on my chest. But the comfort was short-lived. A sudden, sharp pain ripped through my chest, hot and stabbing, taking my breath away. My hand went to my heart instinctively, the mug slipping and shattering against the linoleum floor. Blue and green shards scattered like tiny, broken constellations, and I felt the weight of my own mortality pressing down. The last thing I remember in the physical world was seeing the ceiling light above me, blurred and distant, like a star fading into the void. And then, nothing. Or perhaps something beyond anything I had imagined. I expected darkness, silence, emptiness. But what came next was unlike any fear or comfort I had known. It was strange, gentle, almost unreal. I was no longer in my body. I was floating, light as air, weightless, observing myself sprawled on the cold floor. My gray hair fanned around my face, my hand pressed to the chest that no longer beat. The shards of the mug sparkled around me, frozen in time. Even here, I thought, Jessica will be upset about this mess. A mother's thought persisted beyond life. There was no pain, no fear, only calm. A strange detachment, like waking from a restless dream. And yet, beneath it all, I felt the pull, a gentle tug, not violent, not abrupt, but persistent, guiding me somewhere beyond comprehension. The kitchen, my body, the mug, the bird outside the window. They all began to shrink, fading into a distant memory. I drifted toward a tunnel, alive with colors, pinks, golds, silvers, swirling softly like dawn breaking over clouds. For the first time in decades, I felt unburdened. Every worry, every fear, every moment of care I had carried as a nurse, a mother, a grandmother, they lifted from me. Silence was not empty. It was holy. The universe itself seemed to pause. And in that quiet, a single thought whispered through my soul. This is not the end. The moment after leaving my body was unlike anything I could have imagined. 1 second, I was on the cold linoleum, gasping and frozen in pain. The next, I was hovering above myself, weightless, detached, yet profoundly aware. I could see every detail. My gray hair spread across the floor, the broken pieces of Leo's painted mug glinting like fragments of a shattered star. And yet, there was no fear, no pain, only the surreal clarity of being. From above, I saw the world I knew, the kitchen, the garden outside, the bird fluttering at the feeder, but it seemed smaller, almost toy-like. The muffled voices from the television in the next room carried on, a river of anger and chaos, and I realized the world was still in motion, still caught in its endless cycle of frustration, hatred, and noise. And I was outside it, suspended in a calm that felt impossible. Then I felt the pull. It wasn't rough or alarming, more like the gentle tug of a current pulling me along. The kitchen faded, the furniture shrank, my body became distant, until it was just a memory of itself. I moved without effort, gliding through a narrow tunnel of soft, swirling light. It shimmered with pinks and golds, silver threads weaving through the air like sunrise clouds in motion. For the first time in years, the weight pressing on my chest, my worries, my guilt, my grief, lifted entirely. My life as a nurse, the nights of prayer, the endless worry for my children and grandchildren, even the sorrow I had felt over the news. It all fell away like a heavy coat finally removed. In the silence, I realized it was not empty. It was sacred, alive, waiting. Then came the sensation of being seen. Not by eyes, not by human perception, but by a presence that knew me fully, that understood every unspoken thought, every memory, every prayer whispered in solitude. I wasn't alone. I felt warmth, not just around me, but within me. It was comforting, tender, infinitely vast. And then I saw him, not stepping into the tunnel, not arriving from somewhere far off. He was there, made of light that did not hurt the eyes, but penetrated the soul. I knew, with certainty beyond doubt, that it was Jesus, not the image I had seen in Sunday school paintings, not the stained glass figures I had admired in churches. This was real, and the weight of his presence shook me even in the absence of my physical body. But the first thing I felt from him was not joy. It was sorrow. Deep, unrelenting, all-encompassing sorrow that radiated like warmth and fire combined. It was grief for the world, for humanity, for the divisions and hatred that consumed us. And I understood instantly. He was not grieving for me. He was grieving for all of us. Tears rose within me, not in my eyes, but deep in my soul. I felt the heartbreak of creation itself. And yet, even in that sorrow, there was a profound peace, a sense that everything was as it should be. I had crossed the threshold of death and entered a space where the pain of life could be held, understood, and transformed. A voice, not spoken aloud, but directly imprinted in my thoughts, reached me. Margaret, you see the heart of the world, the anger, the hatred, the poison that flows. It is not the end. There is still hope, and you must witness it. You must tell them. I wanted to ask questions, to speak, but no words were needed. Every truth was communicated in that sacred, overwhelming presence, and I understood. My journey had only just begun. The tunnel opened wider, and the colors began to dance and swirl in patterns that felt alive, almost sentient. It wasn't just light, it was life, breathing and pulsing around me. Every shade seemed to carry emotion: gold for warmth, rose for compassion, silver for clarity. It was as if the light itself knew me, knew every joy and every regret, and welcomed me without judgment. As I moved deeper, a feeling of total release washed over me. I was no longer tethered by my earthly fears or my body's frailty. My years of worry, the sleepless nights, the anxiety over grandchildren, the heartbreaks I had carried silently, all fell away. It was liberating in a way words cannot capture. I felt expansive, infinite, yet entirely grounded in something more real than life itself. Then, through the shimmering glow, I sensed him, a presence vast and undeniable, not stepping from the light, but being the light itself. My heart recognized him before my mind did. Jesus, not as the depictions of churches or paintings, but as a being of pure presence, radiant and tender, yet carrying a grief so deep it was almost tangible. And his sorrow was not mine, yet I felt it in every fiber of my being. It was the grief of a father seeing his children wound each other, of the universe mourning the harm inflicted by those who could not see beyond their own anger. It radiated warmth, yet pressed on my soul like a weight, asking me to witness, to understand. I floated closer, drawn by a force both gentle and irresistible, and then the visions began. First, a small scene, a family dinner. I saw a father's face red with anger, a teenage son yelling, fists clenched, a mother staring down at her plate, silently broken. The daughter, caught between love and fear, barely moved. Their words were daggers, each phrase slicing deeper than any weapon. Politics, pride, resentment, all twisting together like poison in the air. Next, a church, a sacred space, yet divided, filled with people who once prayed together, now glaring at one another. Their faith, meant to unite, had become a banner for conflict, and I heard his thought in my own mind, clear and piercing. They call my name, but they do not carry my heart. They have chosen a flag over my cross Then the cityscape. Streets filled with faces etched in suspicion and fear. Neighbors watched neighbors, not with kindness, but with judgment. Silent questions screamed through the air. Who are you with? What side are you on? Shadows began to appear. Dark, amorphous figures that clung to the angry, whispering poison into their ears. Each argument, each insult, each act of hatred fed them. They grew fat on our division, thriving on the separation and suspicion humans allowed to flourish. I trembled, overwhelmed by what I saw. Lord, what is this? What are they feeding on? The answer came, not spoken, but imprinted in my soul. This is the true war, Margaret. Not of flesh and blood, but of spirits feeding on the darkness that division creates. The bullets are symptoms. The hatred is the disease. I began to understand. The tragedy, the violence, the arguments, they were not isolated events. They were threads in a vast web, a river of anger and fear coursing through hearts, homes, cities, and nations. And yet, even in this vision of despair, I felt a glimmer, a single candle, faint yet persistent, glowing amid the shadows. Even one act of mercy, even one prayer of forgiveness, can push back the flood, I heard him whisper. The light grew stronger, more alive, as if it responded to that truth. The river of darkness was not invincible. Hope was possible, and I realized that I had been brought here to witness, to carry this message back, to become a channel of that living light in the world I had just left. The vision deepened, and the weight of what I was witnessing pressed gently but firmly on my soul. I was no longer merely floating. I was standing, yet not bound by a body, observing the world with clarity, sharper than any earthly sight. Jesus' presence enveloped me, a mixture of infinite love and unbearable sorrow. Every heartbeat of his light resonated within me, and I realized the grief I felt was not mine alone. It was his grief for humanity.